1975, 5 masters came into 5 major spiritual centers in the world, measuring from west to east and not in any sense of importance. 1 into New York, 1 into London, 1 into Geneva, 1 into Darjeeling, and 1 into Tokyo. And later, 1 into Moscow and 1 into Rome. I can give you the name of the master who is in Rome, whose base in the world is the city of Rome. And that is the one through whom Maitreya manifested as the Christ and was recognized as the Christ, the Master Jesus. The Master Jesus is not the Christ and was only the vehicle, the body for the Christ for these 3 years. Today, the Master Jesus is a great master in his own right and is like that with Maitreya. They are inseparable and work together all the time. And if it interests you, both Maitreya and the Master Jesus are present in this room right now. These 5 masters, who became 7 masters, took up their positions in these posts, and gradually more masters come in, until there are now 14 masters in the world, plus Maitreya, the master of all the masters. Maitreya himself came into the everyday world in the 19th of July, 1977. He came down from his mountain, the high Himalaya, on the 8th of July 1977, stayed some days on the plains in Pakistan to acclimatize a body which he had been creating, through which he could manifest at our level. And in that body, he came into London, England, on the 19th of July, 1977. Maitreya has made London what he calls his point of focus in the Asian community of London. From that center, his energies flow out in all directions throughout the world. And he is working hard in every field, edging humanity away from the precipice of self-destruction and towards an understanding of what we have to do to preserve this planet and to create the new civilization of Aquarius. And what is the advice that Maitreya gives the world? Maitreya says, if humanity would continue to exist, wants to exist, it has to change direction, totally. It has to see all members of the human family as its brothers and sisters. He says, people say, money is the root of all evil. He says, no, that's not true. Money is just an energy. You can use it wisely, or you can use it unwisely. We tend to use it unwisely, but it's just an energy. But we have a great lure for money. We must have it, We run after it. It controls most of our actions. But it is still just an energy. It says the real sin, the root of all evil, is not money. It is complacency. Complacency. The sense that I'm all right, Jack. I'm all right. What's the problem? Where's the trouble? Sure, there are millions of people starving to death in the world. I'm sorry for them. I give $1 or £1 or £2 now and then to help them on the way. But it's not my business. They're thousands of miles away. I've got a job to do. I've got to keep my family. I've got to work hard. I don't see why I should do without so that they can live. No, that's complacency. I'm all right, Jack. You look after yourself, I'll look after myself. Since that will end, that attitude will end in total catastrophe. The end of humanity and all life on planet Earth. Maitreya says we have to understand that we live in a spiritual universe. The nature of life is spiritual. And we have to see ourselves as brothers and sisters of the human family. And in a family, everything is shared. Nobody gets more than another in a rational family. Likewise, we have to see that humanity is one and has all the same needs. All of us have the same needs. We have different colors of skin, ordinary. We have different religions. We have different traditions, different languages, different beliefs. But we all have to eat. Every living creature has to eat in order to live. And he thinks of millions of people who are not eating, who are starving to death, year in and year out, who have no hope for their families, who have large families. Why? Because they know that if they don't, and they want one or two to live into their old age, they will have no one to look after them in their old age, unless they have 10, 12 children, because the rest, they know from experience, will inevitably die. That's their lives, and that's the lives of millions of people. Maitreya says, nothing so moves me to grief as this shame. The crime of separation must be driven from the self. I affirm that as my purpose. He says, how do we get peace? That's essential to further life on earth. How do we get it? He says, it's really so easy. So simple if you make the step. And he says, it's simple. You have to have justice. Without justice, there will never be peace. And you look at the world and where is the justice? There is no justice. Millions of people in the so-called third world, the developing world, go without any semblance of happiness, of life as we know it in the West. We don't all know happiness, we have problems, but the problems are all to do with the excess of our goods, not to do with the absence of our goods, not to do with not having enough to eat. not knowing what to give our families to eat, to see them grow, to send them to school, to know that they'll get an education and can find their way by themselves in life when we are gone. They don't see it like that. They wait patiently for God or something, somebody, to give them the next meal. It's a very different thing. There are millions of people in every country of the world who feel outlawed. They feel they have no part in life. Life gives them nothing. They see nothing but an affront. They see nations like the European nations, America, Japan, and the rich countries of the world living in relative luxury, some in real luxury. And they say, look, what do we have to do? We have nothing. We have almost nothing. We don't see how to feed our families. And the bravest, and the youngest, and the bravest of these become terrorists. That's what creates terrorism in the world. They see how the West live, how the developed nations live, the G7, G8 nations live, and they want to do the same. And they feel this weight of disgrace, of going without, of having nothing, and no hope, and the others strutting it across the world. Terrorism is an abomination, a canker. There's nothing good about it, but one has to understand how it comes about. It comes about from having nothing and witnessing those who have everything strutting across the world and thinking the world belongs to them. To get rid of injustice, to get rid of terrorism, which is the result of injustice, one has to create trust. And Maitreya says, how do you create trust? There will never be peace if there is no end to injustice. And so you have to create trust. And there is only one way to do it, he said. Only when you share will you create justice. And he says, when you share, you take the first step into your divinity. Justice, he said, is divine. Freedom is divine. But there can be no freedom without justice. No justice without freedom. Freedom and justice are the very nature of divinity, and sharing likewise. And he says, when you share the resources of the world more equitably, you automatically create trust. And when you have trust, the nations can sit around a table and work out the answer to every problem. But without trust, nothing can be done. And without sharing, there will never be trust. So we have no alternative. We would be doing what we should be doing, but for whatever purpose we accept the principle of sharing, only the principle of sharing will bring peace to the world. And that is what we have to do. For over 60 years, the governments of the world have kept from humanity one of the major events in human history. The coming of the so-called UFOs, the so-called flying saucers, into our planet from where? They have denied the existence of these terrestrial visitors They have denied the experiences of hundreds of thousands of intelligent human beings and denigrated the values and the motives of the people who use the UFOs and shown them to be the very opposite of what they are, calling them aliens, which they are not, calling them fiends, which they are not, calling them fiendishly motivated people who want to capture humanity and enslave humanity and do all sorts of wicked deeds to humanity. Whereas, in truth, the people who have come to this earth in the so-called flying saucers, the UFOs, have proven themselves to be emissaries of light, to be on a spiritual mission of aid to humanity, and we owe them an enormous karmic debt. In 1957, I think it was, I went with a group of people to the Air Ministry in London to ask what was the official view of this government about UFOs, flying saucers as we call them. And I, with the others, were shown into a room with a very pleasant young man who indicated behind him on the shelves hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books, all marked classified, 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 all filled with reports of UFOs sightings by people who were worthwhile, people in the Air Force, people who are in the Army, or the policemen, all bona fide reports by serious, educated people, and they filled these hundreds of books, all of them classified. None of that information was given out by the British government or any other government on earth. Why? Because, not that they didn't believe in them, they did believe in them. They believed them to the extent that they wrote in these volumes all about them. They believed in them all right. But when I said, well, what is your view of this? They said, well, our view is this. The so-called UFOs do not represent a threat to the security of this country, the UK. I said, oh, fine. That means they're friendly, they're harmless, they don't represent a threat, but they exist. I said, oh, no, we're not saying that. We're saying they do not represent a threat to the security of this country. I said, oh yes. Well, if they don't represent a threat, then they must exist not representing a threat. No, we're not saying that. We're just saying that they don't represent a threat to the security of this country. And that's all they would say. They wouldn't budge. But then that gentleman had himself called out of the room. He said, I'll only be 10 to 15 minutes. And of course, as soon as he was out, we fell off the books and studied them and were filled with reports, all about sightings and flying saucers, all authentic, written out. And the British government has now closed that part. You can no longer go and ask such a question. They have made known reports up to a certain date and then destroyed all the books connected with it. And they have closed the office altogether. Where do they come from? Where do the UFOs come from? Where do they originate? Well, not very far away. Well, relatively near. They come, are made in and come from the other planets of our own solar system. Planets like Mars and Venus and Jupiter and Neptune and so on. That's where they come from. The people in them come from these same planets. You say, this man is mad. Everybody knows that there's no life on Mars, there's no life on Venus. You could be throttled up in a minute in Venus. There's no life that we know on Jupiter and so on. How can he say these things? Well, if I only came to tell you what you already know, it would be very boring for you. Already I feel ashamed of going over the same material again and again to the stalwarts who come again and again to my meetings.